We have a working favorite button using Ajax. The last step is for us to create an unfavorite button so that we can also undo our action. The process is almost identical. I'm going to walk you through it, but if you think you have a good grasp on the previous code, then I would encourage you to pause the movie and attempt it on your own first. Then you can watch me if you get stuck. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to switch over to our index.php page, and we want to duplicate the button that we had. So here's our favorite button. I'm going to just copy that. I'm going to put another button right below it. It's going to be called unfavorite button. Unfavorite. And I'm going to copy that button. And let's put it down here below these two as well. And then we want to make sure that the CSS applies as well. You see that I have button favorite button up here. I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to make it also apply to the unfavorite button. And button favorite hover will also need to apply to button unfavorite hover. Okay, so let's jump down to the bottom then. We have our JavaScript here for favorite. I'm just going to collapse that so it folds up. And then where we assign that function as an event listener on the click. So I'm going to take all of that code, I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to paste it a second time, but this time, of course, I'm going to change this one to be unfavorite. And down here, it's going to be unfavorite, and we're going to put it on the unfavorite button. Okay, so now I have my new JavaScript. We need to go through and review this JavaScript. We want it to post not to favorite.php, but to unfavorite.php. And then instead, we get back true from it. Instead of adding favorite to the class, we want to remove favorite from the class. Everything else works pretty much the same. We're still sending the ID in the exact same way. We're just going to be sending it to a different script and performing a different result when we get that result back. Okay, so let's save all of that. Now we don't have unfavorite.php, so we need to create that. The easiest way to do that is just to duplicate favorite.php. So I'm going to go over here to this file. From the file menu, I will choose duplicate. It duplicates the file. Let's rename it to unfavorite. All right, so now we've got our file. Let's come back over here. Let's open it up. And let's see what we need to change. The initialization is all the same at the beginning. We're going to find the ID in the same way. But I want to remove the not in front of in array because we want to check and see if it is in the array, then we're going to remove it. Otherwise, we don't need to do anything. So what needs to change here is instead of adding the ID to the session, we need to remove the ID from the session. There are a few different ways that we could do that. I'm going to do it by writing a new function that will do it. So it's going to be session favorites equal to array remove ID and then pass in session favorites. So this is going to be a function I'm going to write. It's a handy function to have that will remove ID from this array. I'm going to call it array remove. So I've got to define that function. Let's jump up here to the top, and right above is Ajax request. I put a handy function to remove a single element from an array. Now I could type all of that in, but I'm just going to paste some code so that you can just take a look at what I've got, the result. So array remove takes an element, takes an array, it uses array search to find out the position, the index of that element in the array, and then it uses array splice. Array splice allows me to take an array, to go to that index, and to remove one item. That's what the one means. So it's going to remove one item and splice the result onto the end. So it's like taking the first part, skipping one, taking the second part, and taking those two parts and putting them back together, splicing them together. And it returns the array as a result. This is a very handy function to have in your PHP library. So now we'll save it and let's try it out. Let's see if we've got everything working. So I'll go into Firefox. Let's reload our page so that we get all of our new JavaScript code. You can see we also get our unfavorite button. Let's click favorite first. Okay, so now it's favorited. Let's reload our page just to make sure that stuck. It sure did. Now let's click unfavorite, and there it disappeared. Let's reload the page to make sure, yes, it is in fact gone from our session. So now we can favorite things and we can unfavorite them. Now this is all right, but it's a little clunky to have both favorite and unfavorite as buttons sitting here all the time. After all, when it's already favorited, we don't really want to have a favorite button visible anymore. So let's go back to our index.php page. Let's jump up to the CSS at the top. And let's use a little CSS trick to make this a little bit nicer. So right here, after I have the hover statement, I'm going to add another one here, which is button favorite button. And we're going to say that by default, it ought to be display inline. That means that it will display. But if it's been favorited, then we don't want it to display. So I'll copy that, and we'll say if it has been favorited, and we have the class favorite around it, then we want to display none. And let's do the same thing. We're just going to copy those. We'll paste them for the unfavorite button. But for the unfavorite button, by default, we want it to display none, but only when the class favorite is there should it display inline. Let's go back and you'll see how this trick works. Let's reload the page. You can see that unfavorite is here by default for that one. This one has favorite here by default, right? When I click unfavorite, now it switches to say favorite, unfavorite. It's actually two different buttons, but you can see that it swaps them out using the CSS, just like we did with the heart, so that we're actually getting two different buttons each time. Now we have both the ability to favorite a blog post and to unfavorite it, and we did it using Ajax. As a final step, I just want to show you that if you go to favorite.php and you uncomment this line here that says you can simulate a slow server with sleep, I just want to remove that. This is going to sleep for 2 seconds before it tries to execute the script. And it's a useful way to see what it's like. Let me just unfavorite this. Now when I click favorite, it's going to take a 2-second pause. But during that 2 seconds, notice that I can keep moving, and the heart just appears when it's ready. That was our overall goal, to maintain interactivity on the page while this process happens in the background.